Hi, Tina. Welcome to the
Thank,
channel. Thank you
thank
so
you.
much for taking the time to answer a few questions.
Okay.
I think it's very interesting to hear your perspective because you just moved to Sweden, right, a few months
Mhm.
ago. So I wanted to start with the first question. I just have a few, probably around five, so it's not too long. But yeah, the first question would be, when did you move to Sweden and where did you move from?
So I moved to Sweden at the beginning of August, so during the summer, and I moved here from London with my husband and two children.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Um, so one of the questions actually we got from someone was like, how did you move? Like when people
Ah,
want to move, like it's
yeah.
sometimes really hard to find like a moving company or like there's a lot of logistics around it. So it would be very interesting to hear like how it was for you. Did you find a moving company or how did it work for you?
It was a logistical headache, I must say. I'm the sort of person that I like to research everything to death before making a final decision. It took a long time. We planned to move during the summer after our first daughter had completed her first year of school. So we kind of had a deadline. And I guess we didn't really start thinking about, well, I didn't start thinking about actually having to research and really look for movers, international movers, until June, because we got married in May. And so that was kind of, I was busy up until then. So June and July, so literally 2 months. Um, just went on the internet and found like maybe five top rated companies. And then it was a nightmare. Basically, we ended up getting um, in-person surveys. So people actually came to our house and actually looked around the room, and it's much more useful this way. We did it with a company where I had to basically lift my laptop or my phone to basically do a virtual show around the house.
Uh-huh.
Some companies offer that, but I would say that having someone physically in your house to do an inventory is much more accurate because they get a sense of um, how much stuff. And we had an insane amount of stuff for like a 1.5 bedroom house, flat rather. But as soon as we had decided on a company, um, it was pretty smooth actually. So our move took 2 days. So we blocked off 2 days, and they did it themselves. Like you can have the option of packing, but it literally, I like packing because I like to know where everything is. But literally, it was they arrived with all their stuff, and you have to leave the house, or one of you stays and you tell them what things go and what doesn't go. But we had them do it all, and they boxed it up over 2 days, and then the truck left on the Friday.
Okay. So
Yeah.
basically you just researched and then decided based on what they offer to go with
Yeah.
one. Because to be honest, this was the same with us. Like we just did research. I mean, I try to maybe ask people in a community about recommendations, but because the destination is always a little bit different, London, Sweden, or some people move from Portugal to
Mhm.
Sweden. I think every journey is quite different, and the companies who are available within the
Mhm.
country and doing that journey is also different. So I think, like, based on that, it probably just makes sense to do your own research and then decide based on the information they give you and how you feel
Mhm.
with them.
Yeah.
Because at the end, also for us, I mean, we moved at a time where their Brexit came like really into place. So that also
Mm.
meant customs and totally
Yeah.
changed. So we were actually in the worst position where there were new regulations, new rules, and the packing or moving companies had to adapt, and they didn't
Mhm.
really know
Yeah.
what was required. So it was actually the worst time to move, and it was for us. It was also a nightmare. So
Uh-huh.
far, like I heard a lot of from people who moved. Like there's always something. Like it never really goes super smooth. Um, but yeah, so
Yeah. Well, ours actually went really smooth. Like on their side, their service was excellent. Um, And I agree. So just backtracking a little, I do agree that it's definitely worth doing the research on each company to see if they have served any of the destinations that you want to move to. There was one in particular that apparently specialized in Scandinavian moves. So we actually got them to quote first, and when you get your first ballpark figure, you're not quite sure whether, oh, is this the amount I'm supposed to spend? And we ended up going with one who didn't necessarily specialize in Scandinavia per se, but they seem to have a lot of experience just moving around in Europe. Anyway, they just it felt good. They were a little bit more expensive, I would say, compared to like the one who was supposed to be, you know, professional movers to Scandinavia, but we were super happy. So the mishap was actually on my part. They packed so well, and I guess I hadn't really planned about taking the passports out of the drawers. So they had packed the passports.
Oh
They
no.
had packed it into consignment. I was like, oh my God. And I didn't realize literally until so the truck had left on the Friday, and we had our suitcases that we're going to live out from for like the following few days. It was as we exited our flat, going to our hotel for the weekend, I realized the passports.
Oh my
That was
God.
the fright of my life. I was like, oh no, we can't. So I ended up on the Sunday actually going to their depot and intercepting their from like the removal truck from our flat as they were emptying it onto the consignment load going into Europe. So I was there physically having to cut open the boxes.
Wow, okay. So there was a little obstacle then, although it was not their fault.
No,
But
exactly,
moving
right?
always has obstacles
It was
somehow.
definitely me, but aside from that, for us, it went really smooth.
So maybe I
And
can actually put like the 2 or 3 companies you mentioned who you think were good. I can just put them in in the description below, and
okay.
then people can check it out if it's relevant for them. Maybe we can do that because that was one of the questions, and I get it every now and then, a question about moving. But let's move
Okay.
on.
Yes.
I want to know, and probably the audience wants to know, why did you move to Sweden?
Hmm. It's a good question. I would say it's mainly for family. So my husband works for a Swedish company, and we met in London. I'm from London. My family are quite small. It's a nuclear family. It's just 4 of us. And when we had our first daughter, I kind of thought my family would be more help. And and when we had our first daughter, it was before COVID, and it's just all a bit, everything's all new. And then COVID happened, and obviously we couldn't see anyone. And then post COVID, it still didn't really change. And my husband's family is quite big over here. So there's like four siblings, and each sibling has 2 children. So for our kids, we now have 2. So for our kids, they have 6 more cousins over on this side. So we've moved mainly for family network, and with the idea that we would have more help than we did in London. So that was kind of the main drive, family. And also they were quite young. So my oldest just turned 6. So we thought, if we're going to do it, we should do it before she actually, before she starts proper school in Sweden, so that she can actually be part of like socially. So she'd be like more socially, what do I call it? She'll get used to, being Swedish,
I think
I
when you're
guess.
younger, you adapt like quicker
Yeah.
to your environment
Yeah.
and learn the language and like yeah,
Yeah.
um, she probably won't remember that much later on, like how when she was 6,
Mm.
like what happened. So it's probably easier for her. But yeah, also obviously in the UK, you start normally when you're around 4 or 5, right? You start with school. I mean,
Reception is the year they turn 5. So
right?
when they start school, they will be 4 going on 5, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and then in Sweden, everything is a year later. So after having completed reception in the UK and then starting school, this autumn, she's having to do reception again, the Swedish version of reception. It's very different, and a lot of focus is on socializing and playing and free time.
Here in Sweden, right?
Yeah, in Sweden, not academically driven at such a young age. Um, but I would say the advantage of having done 1 year of school in London, where in reception they learn phonics and they learn to read, learn to write, and it's amazing what they do in 1 year. So now that my daughter has that under her belt, coming over to Sweden, she basically only needs to learn the language, not necessarily how to write as well. So she can read, like she can pick up very basic book and kind of work out how to pronounce things because she has an understanding of phonics. So that's been really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't imagine what it'd be like if had we moved over here and she wasn't at the age of learning to write yet. She would, I don't know, well, it would be normal, I guess. But having seen what she can do now, it's just such a huge contrast, such a huge
And
difference.
what do you think, like, being obviously just a few months in, but do you
Mm.
think like the UK version is like more preferable, or do you think the Swedish way you like it?
Um, I will give a very biased answer to that one because I am completely schooled in the UK, so I understand the system. Um, but my partner is Swedish, so when our daughter started school, he was very apprehensive about kids starting so young, wearing a uniform, really hated it. And then he got, kind of came around to it and it was good. And now for me, seeing it kind of firsthand how schooling is here in Sweden, it's a shock to me that everything is so relaxed and laid back. Um, Advantages and disadvantages. I mean, I can't really speak for the majority, but from a personal experience, I just feel if you have a child who's very able and is really super into learning, and having now because she's had that, it's kind of like I don't want to view it as a negative thing, but I do feel like she's on a bit of a plateau of learning, and her excitement to learn is not there anymore because they don't do it so much at school.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Whereas I guess like if you have a child who needs more attention, then it's great. The system is totally geared up for that. Like no one gets left behind. It's the kind of feel. Everyone is attended to. If you need extra help, you will be given it. But if you have a child who needs more, a bit more of a challenge, they, for now, they don't seem to get that.
Right. If they're
Um,
more driven, if they want to learn kind of almost
yeah,
quicker, like I know
that.
that
Mm,
being in Förskola class, which is kind of reception, right, is
mhm.
they learn I don't know, I don't even think they learn every week a letter. I think they learn
I think it's
they
one
learn
letter.
I don't know, maybe every 2 weeks. So
I,
it
I
is
think.
quite interesting. I feel like it's definitely like slower for sure. Like I think, yeah, like you said, they're probably considering everyone and maybe would rather, this like concentrate or focus, or how do you say, orientate yourself on the slowest person and
Mm,
then go
mm,
from there rather
mm.
than maybe the fastest person to
Yeah,
learn.
but I do feel, in the class, not everyone will be the same. So it's really down to the teachers to see which child or how, the number of children that perhaps need a little bit more to keep their, the spark, like they want to learn. Um, so there are children that just like they could do with more, but they're kind of told no, this is the level you need to be at. And for me, that's really hard um, to process and to deal with. Like, I have to trust the system, otherwise, I think I'll just go crazy. So I have to trust that they know what they're doing. But having seen what my daughter can do in a short space of 1 year, having had that sort of teaching at school, I know what she's capable of, and
Yeah.
now she's. I guess that now her focus is actually learning Swedish and making friends. So it's a more of a social social education rather than academically driven.
Right.
And I'm sure they catch up in the end, hopefully. Um, so
Yeah.
I, right now, I'm just going with the way it is here.
Okay. Cool. I have another question.
Yeah.
And it is about finding work in Sweden. So obviously you're here about not even 4 months, I think, or around
Just
4 months.
almost 4 months.
So the question would be like, are you looking for a job? How is it looking for a job in Sweden right now? What's the progress? How are you finding it?
Yeah. Um, so before we moved, I was freelancing in London. After having my second, I went on mat leave and I didn't really go back to work because it would have only been a year until we'd moved. So I didn't see any point in trying to find new work. So I started freelancing, and I've been able to continue with one freelance client. So I'm doing that. So I'm not completely not working, but that is more of an ad hoc basis. So I am looking for work, and it is at the moment it's quite hard. And I thought it would be easier, but I think the area that I'm looking at is so niche. It just doesn't exist. So I've gone through a phase. When I first arrived, I was like, right, yes, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to be checking every day,
Do you want to
looking.
say which area you're looking in?
Oh, yes. So I am a jewelry designer. And so I've been looking for jobs specifically in jewelry design or product development, but anything in jewelry. London had a bigger market, more need for this profession, but not here. It definitely isn't. So I've had to widen my search and sort of, broaden it to, like, say, fashion and interiors, perhaps anything that's design, that's creative. Um, I've had like one interview, but to be fair, that's a British company. But that didn't come to anything. I think the biggest thing is when people say moving to Sweden, oh, it's okay, they speak English anyway, you don't really need to focus on the language. Yes and no. If you want to be employed, you do need to have Swedish, I find, unless you want to work for somewhere like, say, H&M, where they're a global company and the corporate language is English, then fine, you can probably get by without English. But having the Swedish basically opens up more opportunities. So I'm learning Swedish at the moment, but job hunting wise, it's nothing at the moment. And my husband says, give it 6 to 12 months, something will come. But having moved here, I kind of thought in my mind I would just continue at the pace I was. So I'd be freelancing and then eventually working. I can't really imagine not working for like almost a year. So I do feel like I want to get a job, but it is tricky. But totally industry dependent. So if you're in something, say, perhaps like, I don't know, like banking or tech, some sort of fintech kind of industry, you'll probably have better luck. But
Yeah, I mean, I have heard, I can, read in forums and in Facebook groups and stuff like that. People struggle in general really to find jobs. And like you said, I think it's already quite tricky or, difficult for Swedes who can actually speak Swedish, like to find a job. And then again, if you're a foreigner and maybe don't even have that level of Swedish yet, it does add a layer of difficulty to it, really. But I mean, there are probably jobs out there where you don't need necessarily Swedish, but there is not that many. And again, we are in Stockholm. We're talking about Stockholm
yeah.
specifically
Mm-hmm.
compared to London. I mean, there it's so small. Like the jobs which are probably out there have a lot of applicants. Like I remember I had a period of time, maybe a year ago. I was looking also for jobs, and my area was more like social media manager or marketing in marketing. And I sent out a few applications and heard back nothing. Like yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always finding it a bit hard actually just to send like a CV to almost like a random,
Yeah.
like
It's
a job
useless.
position. Yeah. Because
Basic
I've, a lot of
education.
people do that, right? So
Mm.
you have to be almost a bit more creative to
Yeah.
stand out. But that's easier said than done. Like, you know, so many people looking for jobs. Not
Mhm.
everyone can come up with something, to stand out basically. But
But having fluency in English is definitely an advantage because I see a lot of, well, I mean, the jobs that I look for, the ones they do say that being fluent in English is a must in some of them. English being a prerequisite, I would say, is probably something from a bigger company, more of a global kind of company, where Swedish is a good to have, but it's not a must because it's an international
yeah,
company. So unless you are lucky enough to find a work with an international company, then you may not need Swedish. But being in Stockholm is small and in comparison to London, so you can't really get away without speaking Swedish, I would say, unless working in the coffee shop. Not a bad thing. I've been to a fair few coffee shops now in my 4 months here, and I've met quite a few people who work there that don't speak Swedish. It
yeah,
always surprises me that.
yeah, that is
Yeah.
possible. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually quite cool. But yeah, I mean, maybe we do a follow up at some point, like in a year or so, to see like what it has been the first year and like
Yeah.
finding something. Plus, you're obviously learning Swedish, and you
Hmm.
don't really have any like knowledge really, so you're kind of beginner. So it would be
Hmm.
interesting. You're going actually to you're doing a few courses actually, so it will be very interesting to see where you are in 1 year. Because I'm
Yeah.
guilty of actually not being very consistent with learning Swedish. I do it here and
Hmm.
there. I do it online. I went to some courses. I have stopped them based on, like work and environment and stuff. But I feel like I definitely have to catch up a little bit. And I think you will be maybe my motivation as well, because if you start talking all of a
Yeah.
sudden, I would feel really bad because you're here a few months, maybe by the time a
Mhm.
year, and I will be here for like almost
4 years.
4 years. Yeah, exactly.
The next time I see you, I'll make you speak in Swedish
Yeah,
with my
we can
Swedish.
practice together.
Yeah.
So, just like maybe two, three more questions, which are all connected.
Yeah.
It's a bit about what you think about areas in Sweden. For example, the cost of living. So it will be
Mm.
quite interesting. You just moving here from the UK. What do
Yeah.
you think about the cost of living in general, like rent or mortgage, and what you get for it, right? And also when you go shopping, like grocery shopping,
Yeah.
or like what do you think? Like, is it more expensive in the UK, in London, or more in Sweden?
So before moving, we had been to Sweden like numerous times because of family, so we would come over to visit for holidays, and I always got the impression that Sweden was more expensive. It could be because the prices the numbers look like dummy numbers to me. So when I see the number, I just think, oh, that's just how much it is, and then when you convert it, it's probably some things are about the same, but I always had the impression it was slightly more expensive. Anyway, prior to moving, my husband said, no, 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 it's definitely not. It's a little bit cheaper, but and the place that we've bought, we decided to buy. We thought about renting, but just the way we were living in London, like renting for 5 years, I think it got to a point where we just want something that's ours. And for the money that one would spend in London, you can get more value over here. But same as anywhere, if you choose to live in the city centre, it probably costs equally the same as
Mm-hmm.
London. So we chose to move actually a little bit further out to an area called Tabby, and which is actually where my husband grew up, and that's where he's from. So we naturally came back over here, and yeah, I mean, so from in London we had a 1.5 bedroom flat in West Hampstead, and now we have a 3-bedroom apartment in a tower. So we have a lot of neighbors, which is pretty cool. So yeah, there's definitely more. We got more value for the money we spent here. Um, Mortgage wise, it's probably, I mean, there's so many varying factors in it, as you know, like it's like the monthly fee on top of the mortgage as well. It can differ so much depending on the age of the building, the type of building. And I mean, anyone who decides to move over and they have to find housing, you'll come to understand that the market is so different here. And it's heavily based on something like, how the estate agents are, how much, I don't, how do you say it? It's like, I guess, like how well off the estate agents are. It's
Mm-hmm.
something to do with that, but I'm not sure. But I know that food wise, for me, I think it's definitely more expensive. I know in the UK there was, probably everywhere else there was inflation with your general shop. It would used to be something like, £15. We would be able to like go in one evening after work, go to Sainsbury's and buy a few bits and pieces, but that would kind of last the week. Just not I'm not talking about the main shop, just like a few bits and pieces here and there. £15 sort of thing. And then before we left, it probably went up to about 25, 30, like for some of the usual stuff. A small top-up shop basically
Mm-hmm.
used to cost 30. And I would say here, I can pop over to our local supermarket, which is ICA. I'll probably buy like 5 things like bananas, apples, bread, milk, yogurt, that sort of thing, and cheese maybe. And one something like that, £20. In my head, it's 20. It probably isn't, but it's something like 200 crowns. So I would say that every time we go to do just a random top-up shop, it's usually around, like the 200 crown mark. But in general, I think the food we definitely spend more on. I think it's expensive.
has
But
not has not changed. Like you always had that feeling, and now you live here, it's
it's
still expensive.
definitely.
I think as well that it is more expensive.
Mm,
I obviously remember a bit the UK, even if it was like kind of like different times, right? It was kind of during COVID, but even Germany, when I compare to Germany, uh, each item is still a little bit more expensive here in Sweden, I feel. And
yeah,
that obviously then adds up. The whole shopping is
yeah,
then normally a little bit more expensive. Like
yeah.
I agree, like even I still have the feeling it's quite expensive. Obviously, you can have things like Lidl, like there is some like cheaper alternatives,
Hmm.
but not everyone shops at Lidl or has a Lidl around the corner.
Yeah.
It's also more a convenience thing, I would say.
Mm.
And I mean, you rented, and now the monthly mortgage payments. Do you think like it's the same? Was it the same amount, or I mean, now you obviously have more rooms, so maybe
Mm.
you do pay a little bit more than
Yeah.
maybe rent in London. But I remember that rent also in London, and you lived in a very nice area as well. Like is quite expensive.
Yes. It became expensive too. Like we were in the same apartment because of COVID. We couldn't actually move. So we ended up staying there for way longer than we wanted to, and then we had our second one. So from when we moved in, we luckily paid the same rent the whole way for like the 5-6 years we were there. But we know that where the area that we lived, our flat, if it was like at the current market value of renting, it definitely would have been way more expensive, and we wouldn't have lived there.
Right.
But we were just lucky that our landlord decided not to increase it, so it was good. But we would have definitely been priced out, I reckon. Yeah, but so I would say that our repayment, yeah, like the monthly payment is probably around the same. Like if we had stayed where we, if we stayed and our rent was actually increasing with like, you know, according to the market value, I would say we're actually paying maybe a tiny bit less, but it's yeah, a little bit less.
Yeah.
You
So
have other.
normally, yeah, my
Mm,
experience as well is that you maybe pay a little bit less in rent or a mortgage.
mm,
Again, depending a little bit where you live, but also it depends where you live in London, I guess.
yeah,
But then things like groceries and
yes,
stuff like that is
yeah,
actually a bit more expensive, like the day-to-day
yeah.
life.
I would say it's, if you were to level everything out, it's probably the same. It's probably the same. You have things that are slightly cheaper, something's a bit more expensive. So for me, I think food is more expensive. Eating out is expensive compared to London. Of course, in London, you can get expensive
Mm-hmm.
restaurants. You can do an expensive shop if you decide to shop at Whole Foods, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but you have range, there's variety. Whereas here the variety is a bit less, so you are kind of stuck with what you have. So there isn't much choice. I mean, we've only been in for 4 months, and I still haven't got my head round to where things are yet. But I have discovered Willy's, which is another supermarket, a bit cheaper than
Yeah.
Eco. So I have only been to Willy's maybe like 2 or 3 times, but I have noticed that they are a little bit cheaper. So I know that the longer we live here, I'm going to be able to sort of make swaps with certain products, for example.
Mm.
Um, yeah, doing like comparison shopping.
Yeah.
Um,
If you do that, then yeah, maybe you can
mm,
have it a bit cheaper. But my last
exactly.
question, actually, I want to ask is about social life in
Mm,
Sweden, which
yeah.
many people talk about it, many people ask about it, like what is it like? And I obviously share my kind of individual like story or update people, because I'm also evolving. Like it looked maybe a little bit different when I moved here
Mm.
compared to now. But your 4 months here, what is your first impression of like making friends, talking to people? I obviously know a little bit because we talk about it, but it's
Yeah,
interesting for others to hear it as well.
it's it was definitely like, for me it was one of the biggest um mental, like it was like one of the biggest things for me, like aside from moving here to be with family. I think for me it was like the socializing, and it can be very different depending on like what stage in life you're in. So I have a family, I have two small children, so my socializing time and my ability to socialize is much more limited compared to someone who's young and single and just moving city to city. Very jealous if you manage to do that. Um, so my experience so far of socializing, I would say, isn't like it's not as it hasn't been as full as I imagined it to be. But I also knew it wouldn't be the same as like socializing in London, because um, where we are, for example, we don't have many things near us. So it's not like I can just pop down the road with a friend to go to a bar. Like we have a Westfield close to us, but it's not the same. So when I socialize, I go into town center. Um, and even then, I feel like there's not that many people out. So my way of socializing or getting to meet new people has been through Facebook, which I haven't used in years in London. And it's definitely one of like it's probably the biggest platform people use here in Sweden
Mm-hmm.
to connect and to socialize, because it's not just like, even if you try to meet someone in Stockholm is it's small, but also there's less people, so people just tend to just live further away. Example of you and I, we are exactly the polar opposite.
Yeah.
um, in location to Sweden. So I'm in the north and you're in the south. I find it's difficult to meet people like in your area. At least there are people, but it's not necessarily the type of people you would choose to meet, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
I have an advantage where I have the ability to meet other people via the parent group, because we have school age children. So I've been able to socialize with parents, but it's I've only been for 4 months, so I'm not going to be too hard on myself. But since being here, I've made two friends that are outside of children. Uh, One of them is you, obviously, and then another mum I met through Facebook as well. But I would say, if you want to socialize, Facebook is the way, and a lot of people actually are on it. And there are loads of groups. I just unfortunately haven't had time to being part of more groups and go to more of these meetups. At the beginning, I was really, up for it, but now, like, we're heading into the colder weather, and I kind of just want to stay in.
Yeah. Welcome to Sweden. That's what people like to do, like stay in.
Yeah,
But
stay
also,
in.
I think you will probably just meet more like other foreigners, I guess, like through these
Yeah.
groups. Like, and
Mm.
I know you mentioned like the parent group you have in your area. And I guess you met maybe some Swedish like parents.
Yes,
And
mostly
how
Swedish
and
parents.
how
Yeah.
has that been? Like, is it hard to
Mm.
really get to know them, or
Mm.
or do you find it okay or good?
I've had varying experiences. So I would say, like, perhaps the more typical Swedish parents I've met are from through school, where we've had class socials. So we've had like a Halloween disco. We've had like an afternoon outdoor in the playground, where all the class kids come together, and then also it's for the parents. Um, my impression is, I think, is exactly what you read about on the internet. The Swedes are friendly, but you have to work quite a bit to get to know them. They're all very friendly, and they all switch to English for me, which which I'm very thankful. Um, but they're I being British, I miss that banter. It's just this light talk, but there's always conversation going, and the Swedes don't tend to do that. Cultural difference, and I totally respect that. But I just miss that, being able to just talk to anyone, because I'm still learning. I'm still learning what like being Swedish means. Um, so I've had some interactions where it's been super friendly, and it's just been super lovely. I've had interaction where one has been maybe not as willing to speak in English with me, and it's both good and bad. It means it forces me to use my Swedish, so it's good. But when we pass each other in like in school, I say, "Oh, hey, how are you? How are you?" She just goes. It's like, you can talk to me. It's okay. But no, in general, it's been good. But I do feel there's less of this, because there isn't that sort of light chat that the Brits love doing. It's a bit harder, I think, to get to know the Swedes, especially in winter. I
Yeah.
feel like in summer they're probably a bit more open, because everyone's out, everyone's enjoying the sun. I think it'll be much easier in summer, but right now, I would say the majority of people who I am friends with are international. So you'll have couples who are maybe one of them is Swedish and the other is international, and those are the families that I feel like I understand more
Mm.
and can be friends with a bit
Yeah.
easier. Yeah.
I mean, they're probably also more approachable because they know how difficult it is to probably move to another country and getting to know. You already
Mm,
have this connection of like,
we're international.
yeah, you like
Yeah.
moving somewhere. Like
Mm,
I said on my channel before that actually no matter where I moved, I
mm,
always met foreigners basically
yeah.
first, like from other
Yes.
countries, just because you have this, how do you say, like you have something in common. You have something
Yeah.
in common. You can talk about, and then
See.
obviously there's other areas you can talk about. But I thought like it's actually cool that you have a bit of a group, like a school group, because
Yeah.
I actually don't have that. Like we
Mm,
don't have that.
mm.
We we had like like not parent meeting, but more like where teachers
Meetups.
talk,
Okay.
more
Mm.
that where the teacher tells us
Oh,
about
okay.
the class, but
Mm,
the parents don't really interact with each other.
mm.
So we don't, or we have no WhatsApp group, or
Mm.
whatsoever. So it's a bit harder. And the one parents they talked to me, I think that it was a German guy who who basically heard us talking in German, and then again you have a bit of a connection. And I
Yeah.
remember Chris, my partner, went to ice hockey with my daughter, and he did actually speak every now and then with other parents. Like,
Mm.
it is actually quite a pleasant experience. But there
Mm.
also recently was a new guy joining with his daughter, and
Mm.
he heard Chris talking in English, and he was from Britain, so he was like
Running over.
running over. It's like, hey. So
Hey,
there's
come back here.
definitely, yeah, a
No,
difference.
I mean, I do it too. When I hear British accent, I just my ears switch on. It's like I can understand everything you say because it's people say you can get by without learning Swedish, but all I hear is Swedish. Just like in passing, all I hear is Swedish, and it's like it's so easy. You just kind of you just tune out, you zone out, you don't listen anymore.
Yeah.
And then the moment I hear English, I'm like, I understand you.
Yeah, I mean it is a challenge, and I think only people who really move somewhere and maybe don't know the language, like even if you learn the language before, like through a course and whatever, I think you have to immerse yourself like properly, and then obviously also dare to speak, which is a big problem for myself, like even like talking, even like ordering something, I panic. I always had that, but I learned English and I overcame it eventually,
Yeah,
so I should be able to do that.
you can definitely do it. I
But
I
yeah,
think
it's
at the
not easy.
beginning, with the beginning when we first moved here, I really wanted to I wanted to use Swedish at every opportunity. When I went to the cafe, I was like, right, I'm doing this. I'm gonna order this in Swedish, and was really proud that I basically went in, ordered in Swedish, and got my coffee. I was like, yes, I did that.
It's
But
good.
I feel like the longer, I mean, I haven't been there for very long, but I feel like I do have moments that I feel like, you know what, today I don't feel like speaking Swedish. I'm just going to speak in English. Um, and then some days it feel okay. Some days I feel like, oh, I failed. Like I should, because why not? I should, because I speak English at home, so I should use every opportunity to use my Swedish. And I think compared to my daughter, who she goes to school, she goes to a Swedish. We decided to put her into a Swedish school rather than an international school because children adapt so quickly anyhow. Basically, just threw her in the deep end, and she's doing so well. And she doesn't, like I'm taking classes. I go twice a week, and I guess I'm better now. When I see words, I can read it better. But it's still the same. It's just speaking. It's just free. I just freeze. And when
Mm.
people talk to me, so I'm like, I don't know what you're saying. But children who do an international move, and if they were to go straight into like a the language of the country, she is she understands so much more than she realizes, and probably more than me. Um, and it's amazing when like our neighbor came and knocked on our door, and I just thought, oh my god, we're gonna have to speak in Swedish now. But my daughter just handled it. I mean, she wasn't asking all the questions, she wasn't the adult, but when our neighbor asked a question, she's just I could see her taking in the question really relaxedly, and like she's processing the answer, and she just said it in Swedish. Things like, "What's your name? How old are you? Who is this? This is my little sister." It's like, mate,
Amazing. The
how do you do
attitude, the lightness of it, like we
that?
need that actually. We would
Exactly.
learn probably so much easier if we didn't have all those overthinking, like of like making mistakes, or if we don't
Mm.
understand something, again there is this freezing like a shock
Yeah,
basically, like what to do.
but
It's weird
yeah.
that we adults are so traumatized somehow of not
I
learning
think it also, as
languages.
adults, there's expectation for you to know more, right? Because when you speak to a child, it's the
Mm.
same question. How old are you? What's your name? So it's, the dialogue is within context, which is like how I've been handling my Swedish practice when I go to a cafe. Everything must be in context. Throw me one question out of, that's not in my dialogue. I don't know what you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, very
um,
true.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This was so cool to hear how your
Yeah.
first month in Sweden, in Stockholm, were. And obviously, it will change, I'm sure, quite a bit. And especially you're learning Swedish and like looking for a job and all these things. Like, so hopefully, in a few months or 6 to 12 months,
In a
it
year's
will be
time.
more
Yeah.
established and a bit different.
Mm.
So I think it would be actually quite cool to catch up with you in a year and compare our two videos
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. We could do one in the summer then, because
Yes,
right now it's Christmas, kind of Christmassy and cold and horrible. Um, so yeah, we could do one in the summer. We can be outdoors.
perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.